Hi, and welcome to the Locker Room. I'm one of your hosts, Justin Ham, and thank you so much for joining us today as we journey through tough issues that guys face as athletes, as coaches, and as humans. Let's welcome our guest today, Jesse Tanner, as he is here today to help us navigate the questions of guys, God, and does it matter? Okay. How you doing, Jesse? Thanks so much for joining us.
Awesome. Thank you for having me on.
Yeah.
Looking forward to this time with you and the team here.
Absolutely. We're excited to get into it. So, I've gotten to know you a little bit over the last 7 or 8 months I've been on staff, but why don't you tell us just a little bit about your background and where you're serving and kind of your role in life right now?
Yeah. Um, Background feels like a long story, but I'll highlight a piece of it because it's going to, I think, connect to um, some of what we get into later. But I was able to be on staff with the church from about 2009. My wife and I worked with the church and children's ministry with our three boys who are now young men. Two in high school, one about to graduate, one in college. And, and that was a powerful time, but it also began like just where my heart began to stir for the next generations.
Mm,
And, how can I walk with them? And really, I felt called to youth ministry. And then I recognized the the youth actually already had, like, if you would, their junk, like they already had been exposed to so many things, and my heart just then stirred, like, man, can we catch uh like the kids before, like, they've just been piled with the weight of the world, where they can experience Jesus and the Holy Spirit, and just begin to make it their own. And that's how we ended up in children's ministry. um and so that's where ministry began. But it was at the kind of the culmination of ministry. I'm getting to be a lead pastor. My wife and I are working with a rural church in the southern tier of New York, and we had a guy that we supported that was a FCA um, guy down in Florida, and he was from our area originally, and he came in, and man, he just spoke life over my boys. They are great athletes, and he just talked to them about the opportunity they can have to impact their environment, their community, the school, and
yeah.
just like talk to the power of, like, hey, people look up to you, like, you're
Yeah.
leaders. And I saw them, like, kind of sit up, like, and not take a pride, but take it like a responsibility, that they wanted to be part, something they felt activated, like, hey, I can go make my faith mine and have an impact. And so that was really when FCA began to be in my lens. And so when we had the opportunity to move back to the Rochester area, I was looking to come on staff with FCA, and there were no positions. So uh, we just plugged back into the area, and a door did open up with FCA, and so that's how came on staff a little over 3 years ago. Started with a focus on Rochester, um, focusing on the city, and now I get to support, like, our western New York area. Uh, so
That's so cool.
it's been a
That's
little
awesome.
wild, but
Yeah, I can imagine. And your title now is you're director of all of Western New York right now, right?
yeah, the title is, who knows, whatever my email signature says, like, that's the title you can use. It got approved by my boss.
That's awesome.
No, it's I think one of the things that's been exciting about it is getting to build staff, getting to build
Mm,
teams, getting to pour into others. And by pour, it's also demonstrate, like, live in a way that reflects what I'd like to see.
yeah.
And so that doesn't always, like, a lot of people say, always lead. And like, you can't show weakness. And I just
Hmm.
disagree. I'm like, I'm going to lead, but I'm going to talk about my weaknesses. I'm going to talk about how I'm growing
Yeah.
through those. And
Yeah.
so some of that has just, I think, allowed us to transition in a season where there's a lot moving, a lot going on. Um, and and so it's, there's a real excitement with that. But let me let you
Yeah.
get on to the next.
No, that's
The next
great.
piece.
No, I love what you just said about how, people when they think of leading, they have this idea that you can't lead from a position of weakness. And I'm always curious when I hear, because I've heard that too. And I'm always curious when, like, the reason for why. And it's like I never really understood, why are there some people that are afraid to show weakness? And
Yeah.
it's just something that I've kind of wrapped my head around, and I really don't even have an answer, but I
Yeah.
wonder what your thoughts are. Like, why do you think it is that people do think that? Because I think you're right. There is this attitude of you
Hmm.
need to have that general mentality, that,
Yeah.
never stiff upper lip, all of that.
Right.
What do you think? Why do you think that is?
So I can just speak to myself. Like, I grew up in the church, grew up in a Christian home, and that was what was demonstrated for me.
Yeah,
And I think that was probably what was demonstrated for them. I was a PK, so especially in a pastor's home, there are maybe not expectations your parents have on you, but there's expectations the congregation has on you, like
sure.
being this great kid, or you're the rebel, like on
Yeah.
the way, like
Only two
and
roads for a pastor's kid. You're one or
only
the
two
other.
rows, right? And so a lot of expectation, and for me it meant like I can't show the weaknesses,
Mm.
and I'm gonna just jump ahead to like it it led to me not having deep relationships for years,
Yeah.
or not being incapable, because I didn't feel like I could be truly known. I didn't feel like I could always show all the pains or the pieces. Um, and you know, I was blessed though. I was on staff with a church, um, and me and one of the other staff guys realized we had an afternoon window, just with some time, and we just started like, let's grab tea and take a walk. Like, let's just get out of the office for a little bit. We were at a downtown campus in Rochester, and I really felt like, uh, because of work he had done in his own life, he began to be able to demonstrate, like, hey, how to talk about hard things. Like, man, what's hard in my marriage? Like, what do I want to see different? Like, what do I want to see change in my own life? We began to really build a powerful relationship where I got to see some of that vulnerability and weakness, but led in a way that invited me to be challenged, not just like, you hear, what is it, uh, sorrow loves company, or something like misery loves company.
Misery
Like,
loves
it wasn't
company.
it
Yeah.
wasn't a like, let's share our miseries and then like, yep, I can commiserate with that. It was like, yeah, I'm in this, but like I believe like God's word is true. I believe what he says, and so it was a, let's stir each other up. And I still connect with this friend. We're in different ministry roles, different places, and we still work to have a weekly connect, to just like,
Yeah.
man, like what's happening in life, you know, and we talk about the raw, like the difficult, the painful things, and we speak life into those. We speak about the joys, like, we're looking at our kids, like, man, what a joy to look at your kids and see, them having breakthrough, or moving forward in their own right, in the things of the Lord. um
Mm.
and I feel like some of that relationship like has taught me, like, man, I don't have to look like I got it all together. And there are people that will accept me and speak, like, value who I
Mm.
am, without a facade of like, hey man, it's all like, I got it all together, it's all good, like everything. And um but then as I just did personal work with,
Mm.
understanding like my family systems and things that, I believed about myself, some people call them our wounds, right?
Yeah.
um I began to recognize, there is actually a power that comes from vulnerability. And I think in the church world, like, that can be really scary, because if you overshare,
Mm.
um are you going to show up to a congregation that's half the size the next week?
Right.
And that's what I love about what I get to do, because it's a lot more relational. It's a lot more about building, like, the discipleship piece alone. Um, and I've seen for myself breakthrough as I allow myself to be known.
Right.
As I walk. Um, I don't think there's an excuse to like have a weakness and like, yep, that's my weakness and it's my crutch. I mean, we hear Paul talk about his
Yeah.
thorn, but I don't think he talked about it in a way of like, it's my get out of jail free for like whatever this thing is. It was just an
Right.
acknowledgement of his dependency on the Lord.
Yeah.
Um, eh, so
Oh, that's great. And I think that's something that I think a lot of people, like to your point, they I don't want to say hide behind it, but that kind of they do. They hide behind their weakness. So rather than admit it, they just stay hidden behind there. What was it about you when you were on staff that made you decide, there's my teammate that I want to connect with and start to develop that connection? What kind of was the tipping point for you there?
yeah, I think that we had and also like I think ministry is a great place to build relationship
Oh, for
because
sure.
you're like on focus on the same things together. So we had built some of that relationship in like ministry, like watching the way the other person chose to lead, their ministries and the different things. Like, hey, I want to be connected to somebody that's like that. So there was already um, some relationship. But when we realized, like, hey, guess what? We're not in the upper echelon of like leaders. They have this afternoon meeting.
Yeah.
We don't have to be in it like everyone else does. They have meetings all day. We don't have to be in meetings all day. But what would it look like to just take a breather after being in meetings all morning and just get a walk and like check in on life? Um,
Mm,
and so it probably began as a little bit of like escape in Rochester when the days are nice and you can get out of the outside, like you do it. You
yeah.
don't waste them. So it's probably partly that of just like, hey, if we don't get out, this might be our chance to get sun for the day. Um, but from it, something began to birth of just like, man, this connection time is powerful. Um, hey, I really have somebody that I can open up and share that I know is just standing with me as I walk through whatever the things are. Um, so that was kind of its formation. I don't know
Yeah.
that it was intentional to start, but we recognized something that we wanted to continue.
Yeah. And it probably, I'm imagining, because I have a similar experience, but like once you realize that you found something that feels a little bit different, like you have that connection, you have that person who, when you open up to, you kind of you don't feel like they're judging you, you don't feel like they're coming at you,
Mhm.
but you feel like you got somebody kind of there, like, Moses when they're helping hold your arms up,
Right.
because you just need that sometimes.
Yeah.
And there's a risk to that though, right? Because like in order to find that, you kind of got to put yourself out there. And
Yeah.
and I think that's where a lot of guys specifically, they're not quite ready to take that risk.
Right. Yeah. And I think like I've watched some vulnerability. We'll label it that, but it's really messy. Meaning it's more about like what can I get from just like kind of spewing as
Mm,
opposed to like what is my purpose for being vulnerable?
yeah.
Is it to show that like the goodness of the Lord working? Is it to invite other people into a journey that they might not realize is possible? Like, is it if my vulnerability can like stir up hope for somebody else that their story can change or their story could be different, then like I want to be in that seat.
Yeah.
But if it's just about like, hey, how can this paint me? How like, or I don't want to carry this by myself, so bloop, everybody gets
Yes.
it. Um, I think that's not healthy.
No,
But
agreed.
when when the heart is like, man, how can my story encourage you? How can my story bring life? And how can uh, if I step towards you with this like openness of, hey, this is who I am, I'm extending a safe place for that to also happen back, right? And how many
Mm,
men, like I know growing up, I can't really remember the time where I had that demonstrated for me. Um, I think there were genuine men that were around me, that loved me, that cared for me. Um, but never to the point where I felt like, hey, I can open up my deepest, darkest pains, hurts, secrets, and share those, and it's safe. And I think as we choose to walk in vulnerability, it opens the door for those relationships to grow, for those spaces to be a place where somebody else can walk towards their freedom, walk towards hope, in their own life from, who knows, trauma, from uh, core wounds, from pains, from addiction, whatever the things are that I can speak from a men's perspective because I'm
Sure.
a man, but like we don't feel like at least I don't feel like in our society we give a lot of room for them to show weakness, right? In our sports, can you show weakness in a sport? Like, no, it's gonna get taken, you're gonna get taken advantage of. Um,
Yeah.
Yet at the same time, if you know your weakness, like if you're on a team, you know your weakness, the coaching strategy isn't to have that weakness is exposed. It's like, how can we put the other pieces around it? If I have a strong offensive basketball player, um, I'm not going to put him on their best defensive or their best offensive player because he's going to have no legs later in
Right.
the game. It's going to expose a weakness, right? Like, um, so we put team around, and I think that's like where it comes back to is we weren't designed to be alone. We
Right.
weren't designed to be in life by ourselves. So as we allow others in, like where we can walk together in a way that's team. So if I'm having a horrible day, if I get bad news, and I don't feel like I can pull get out from under the covers, I know, hey, I can text Justin, I can text, one of the other guys from the staff or one of my guys, just be like, man, I need prayer. Like
Yeah.
I need somebody in the trench with me. And we know like I'm not staying here because others are going to be like, bro, you got this. Like there's hope. Like move forward. So I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm ranting now. Be
No, preach,
careful.
brother, preach. No, this is the beauty of it is the questions provoke thought and thought provokes response. And just in listening to you, one of the things that my counselor says all the time is relationships hurt us, but relationships can
Mhm.
heal us.
Yeah.
And I love that idea because you're right, as athletes, now coaches or, being around sports, you're 100% right. Like I think of, someone like Larry Bird, right? Obviously
Hmm.
great offensive player, one of the best ever, but you weren't going to put him on, Magic Johnson. You
Mm-mm.
know what I mean? Because his skill set is different and
Yeah.
you don't want to hide that. In order to be the best version of yourself, I think you got to be aware of your weaknesses because
Yeah.
that's I think where people struggle is they don't have that awareness. They either
Yep.
refuse to look at it, they refuse to acknowledge it, or they don't, or it's ignorance and they don't even know that what their weak spots are. But,
Yeah.
I was a basketball player. I couldn't really dribble. I could shoot okay and I could rebound, I could
Hmm.
play defense, but you didn't want me leading the fast break. So I knew that.
Right.
So I get a rebound. If I don't have a clear path, I'm kicking it ahead to somebody else.
Yep.
Because for me to be my best version of myself, you have to know what you're not great at. Now,
Yeah.
that doesn't mean I don't practice dribbling. It doesn't mean that I don't work on my ball handling. It just means that that's
Hmm.
not my strong point.
Yep.
And I think a lot of times people, men, guys, don't know what their weaknesses are.
Right. Yeah. Right. Um, and 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 really, like, where do you learn to identify them? Like I know for me, even now, it can be really hard to say, hey, this is my need. Like this
Mm,
is because I just feel like, oh, I should be able to handle whatever.
yeah.
Um, and so that there, I think it's work. It's others being around you, and then identifying like, man, why the heck did that person like rub me that way? And I get so like freaked out or just decided I didn't want to, like shut down or amped way up.
Yeah.
Often it's can be shown, it can show it, it can be an indicator, right, of just some other stuff, a wound, a weak, like a growth area. Um, and yeah, and I love what I love about the locker room is it's allowing uh, others to hear stories of like how I grew, how I
Mm-hmm.
identified like a brokenness or sin or uh a place where like, hey, what, like I will never be enough in my sport, but
Mm-hmm.
I'm enough because of who the Lord says I am. um you know, my identity in my sport is one day going to change, but my identity in Christ, it's a set thing, and I can live from a place of my identities in Christ. um
Yeah.
but uh you know, so we're growing, we're rubbing some of those places where people can see like, oh man, this is a place that I need growth. This is a place to identify what those are, you know. But the next step is like, who can you talk to about it?
Yeah.
um I know, uh, as a coach, you know, in certain environments we can be that person, but there's environments where we can't be. But like, who who are the people, you know? I For my wife and I, we always talk about like, who else do our kids have
Yeah.
in their corner, you know, that are saying the things, or from a like, encouraging them in the Lord, but maybe saying them completely different than we've said it. um and you know, I think it's so important, and that teaches like our you know, for our boys, it's taught them,
Yeah.
you know, how to see like different people lead, and how to move forward as you know. I feel like I'm getting off a little bit here, but let's see if I can bring it back in.
No, you're good. Cook. Let them cook, as the kids say. Just cook.
Yeah, but the uh, you know, I think, uh, we, like as a coach, like we can demonstrate like, bro, I lost my junk with you the other day after that game. You know,
Mm-hmm.
we didn't stick to our game plan. That's not an excuse though. Like, you
Yeah.
know, and this is how this is going to look moving forward.
Yeah.
Like, we can show that, or we can just choose to walk in and act like it never happened.
Right.
Um, and you know, I think those are ways that we get to demonstrate like, hey, does a kid actually want to come up to me and say, hey coach, actually, like, I find myself getting like freaking out at my parents all the time, like upset all the time. You know, thank you for like sharing your own, like
Yeah.
what you're working on. um so it's just important for our kids, you know, to have other people.
Yeah.
um
Absolutely.
and from a place of vulnerability, guess what, my kid's probably not going to open up to me about some of the stuff.
Yeah.
But if I can demonstrate what it looks like in my own life and having those friends, they can then go have those friends. If some of the people, like, what I love is I have younger staff around me,
Mm-hmm.
and my kids look up to some of them,
Sure.
and that's just been a progression of time. um they know that they can text one of them like, hey, I'm in this scenario or this situation, and they're going to get advice, and it's a safe place. And they know like, hey, these people walk some of the same things in front of me. So you know, I think got off of vulnerability a little bit, but I think it's the community, like having community though, is also
Yeah.
where we learn to have that vulnerability. It's where we create the space for vulnerability to happen. Um,
Mm.
you know, I think that, uh, when you're inviting somebody in, you can do it with vulnerability, but when you're
Yeah.
creating a culture, a climate, a place where people feel like they can show who they are. Like, I'm not gonna hide. Like, if I have messy things, it's safe to share that, or to begin to talk about that. I think building a culture, a community where that can happen, is really powerful. And I think that takes time,
Mm.
intentionality, and it has to get demonstrated. You know, it had to be demonstrated for me to say yes. Let me start moving towards that. um,
Yeah.
and so I can appreciate that somebody else chose to be vulnerable, take some steps to demonstrate, you know, what it looked like to like just show a deep dark pain, right?
Mm.
And and begin to process through that from a place of like, I'm going to have hope, and this is what I'm walking.
Hmm.
It opened the doorway for me to begin to be able to do that, find words for it, walk in that. So
Yeah,
anyway,
no, that's so powerful to hear how that works. And I think one of the things that I love about what you said is, you've showed, you've modeled for your kids, your boys, like that what community might look like. And they have access now to people that work with you. They have people they can look up to. They have people they can reach out to. And I think one of the things that I've learned along the way is that, like I mentioned earlier, relationships hurt us, relationships heal us, but at the same time, not everybody deserves my vulnerability. And I think that's where
hmm
that level of not deserves a strong word, but not everybody should get our complete vulnerability because not everybody's a safe person. So
right.
what do you think is a way to maybe balance that? Like how do we know who to be vulnerable with? How do we know who to reach out to? How do you, if there's some people listening and they're wondering to themselves,
Yeah,
like, yeah, I definitely need that in my life, but who do I go to? How do I know?
yeah. Um, I think there's a couple of things. I think discernment,
Hmm.
like what is Holy Spirit, like if he's nudging you, um, being obedient, is the best policy. But
Hmm.
there might be other things. There might be things that, like, say you're married, like there might be things you need to talk through with your spouse and make sure they're okay that you're sharing.
Hmm.
Um, if you're unsure, like maybe you talk with your pastor about it. Maybe you talk with a mentor or somebody you disciple with. Maybe it is a coach of just like, hey, I'm trying, like, I really don't know who I should share this with. And you kind of can test that out. Um, I think you want to practice and start vulnerability with somebody that's going to demonstrate safety.
Hmm.
Um, and and like you said earlier, your therapist. I've had, I have a therapist as well. I think we can also learn that in those environments. So if you're in college, guess what? Your campus has a counselor on campus.
That's
Um,
right.
and it can be a place to start. Uh, it, you also are listening to the locker room. You can go look at the different episodes and say, man, who spoke something to my story, um, and you could potentially reach out to one of the people that shared from the locker room, because if their story has an intersection with your story, they may be able to speak and create like safety, because like they understand what you're walking. Um, but I think there's wisdom in counsel. So who are the people you filter safe things through. I can say if you have a like a very unsafe, uneasy feeling of like, hey, I'm not sharing this with this person. You probably need to listen to that.
Yeah.
And it might not be the person; it might be the timing.
Hmm.
Um, and then, um, but I'd love to hear what you would have to share on that too, Justin, because I know you've done a lot
Yeah.
of work with, um, different ones,
Hmm.
that where you've probably guided that more from a therapeutic focus. Um,
Yeah.
it might be good for people to hear what you would suggest too.
Sure. I know one of the things in my journey, like once I kind of caught the idea of being vulnerable, I probably was what you would consider that classic overshare.
Hmm
I actually on my interview, my panel interview for FCA, I was super duper vulnerable, and it ended up not hurting me at all or anything like that,
hmm
but um, I realized I'm like, you know what? I need to probably be a little bit more intentional. And I think for me, it was an awareness of the fact that, part of my um, part of the way I was wired and part of the way that I was, sharing was in a way to almost make me feel better. So like it wasn't
hmm
necessarily a matter of wanting to, just share my story and communicate and connect, but it was like it's like I had this inside of me and like by talking about it, it made me feel better. And what I
hmm
realized is that's not the right motivation to open up
Right.
and to pour yourself out. And
Yeah.
is not because, you feel like, whether it's a compulsive urge or whether it's
hmm
I feel I feel like the word I like to use is vibrating. Like I feel like I'm not
Hmm.
okay inside and I'm vibrating. And if I just tell somebody, then maybe I'll feel better.
Yeah, I like that.
Um, and that was something that I had to become super duper aware of. And my therapist helped me kind of recognize that is that I think as humans, when we get that feeling of vibration, it's that the connection to the idea of I'm not okay.
Hmm.
And when we feel like we're not okay, that's when we typically, might look at things to make ourselves feel okay. And that's where
Yeah.
potential like things like, substances could potentially come in there to make yourself feel
Hmm.
better. Smoking, uh, looking at stuff on the internet, looking at porn, whatever
Yep.
that might be to make yourself feel a little bit better. And what ends up happening is when we begin to go down that road, and we realize, I'm not okay, I'm freaking out, and these things aren't helping, that's when we get that feeling of hopelessness and helplessness. And
Yeah.
I think that's when we got to remember that, what God says we are okay. And we're not
Right.
okay because of what, mom or dad say. We're not okay because what a
Hmm.
coach says. It's because God said, I knitted you together in your mother's womb. Like
Yeah.
I love you. You're fearfully and wonderfully made. He delights
That's
in
good.
us. Like these are all the things that we have to continually remind ourselves of.
Yeah.
These are the things that God says. So all of that to say is that's something that came from awareness. And I think
Hmm.
for a man, for a person to experience healing, they have to know themselves to a degree.
Yeah.
And I think obviously Socrates wasn't biblical, but he was right when he said we need to know ourselves. And we
Yeah.
can't know ourselves unless, we're aware of where we're at and what we're doing. So for me, that's the biggest thing is, why do I want to share to this person? Is it because I'm
Yeah.
craving connection? Is it because I want to make myself feel better? Is it because I want them to tell me I'm okay? Or
Yeah.
is it because, they have advice, they have things that I want to share? Because I do think in the beginning I wanted them to tell me I was okay. And that's why I would tell
Right.
them all my deep dark things. And then they're like, whoa, well, I know I just met you. I'm like, okay,
Hmm.
well, so that I think is something that's really important is understanding that level of awareness, recognizing that no matter how you're feeling, God still says you're okay,
Yeah.
and then living your life out of that trust that I am okay, even though I don't feel like I'm okay. And then prayerfully putting those people around you that I'm like, hey, can you help me? I'm struggling. And then it's that
Hmm.
creating that idea of community.
Yeah. No, I like that. Um,
Yeah.
I think another way we can sometimes share is it's almost like let me put this thing out here and like see if they'll actually reject me. Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
like I want to be accepted, but it's from like that wrong place, or like,
Mm,
no, I'm going to prove to you I'm not worthy. Like you're going to reject, and like there's so many different, and they really do like root from our wounds or the things we
oh
believe
yeah.
about ourselves, from just our past experiences,
Hmm.
as opposed to like what the word says. And I love that you were sharing some of those, like, fearfully and wonderfully made. I knit you in your mother's womb. Um, like there are so many truths that we can walk and apply, um, and they're different than what we heard growing up. They're different than
Yeah.
what we perceived from different encounters with family, with friends, even with our sports. Like there are things we've heard from our coaches, that we've just taken on as some of our identity, and they're not our truth. Um, but again, uh, it's in vulnerability where we begin to, identify, some of those places, um, and it is, uh, it is great before you're going to share to ask yourself, what's my motivation? You
Yeah.
know, what is my motivation? Um, and if your motivation is I have to get this off my chest, then do it with the right person. I would encourage everybody that's listening, especially if you're a believer, you should have somebody, whether you call it an accountability partner, whether you call it just a best friend, but you should have questions that you're asking each other. They should have to do with like, um, you know, moving towards goals that you have in your life. It should have to do with what are growth areas. Like there might be places of sin or even like secret sin,
Hmm.
but in this relationship, you're being able to expose that they're asking you like, how are you doing with it?
Yeah.
From a place of accountability. Uh, but we all need that.
Yeah.
You are not like, even in the garden, the Lord said it's not good for man to be alone. Like
That's
he
right.
recognized he needed other humans, not just the wife, but like human. And we're meant, like, even God isn't just God, it's Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. It's
That's
the
right.
Trinity. Like how many things do we need to see where he's relational and does things from a place of relationship? We need relationships. Um, and
Right.
we need relationship with the Lord.
Mm.
And a lot of times, uh, we're gonna be Jesus with skin on to somebody else. I'm not calling us Jesus. Let's just clarify, just clarifying, because I can see some people saying that's what I said. Um, but uh, but for some people, like when they're in a place of hopelessness, you're showing up and reflecting Christ in that moment, or you're demonstrating the love of Christ in that moment,
Yeah.
and we need that. I still
Mm.
remember my therapist saying, "Hey, you might not have hope, but I'm going to stand here as hope for you."
Mm.
For me, it was a Christian therapist, which was great because he could
Yeah.
hold on to the promises. He could speak from a place of, like, I've seen
Yeah.
others have freedom and healing in the same places that you're talking about. Um, I know that this is for you as well, Jesse, and how powerful. I've been able to sit there with others that, just you can. They might not use the words of hopelessness, but you see it on their face, you see it in their eyes,
Mm.
you see like just the shoulder, like the heaviness, and you just speak, you can just speak
Mm.
hope.
That's right.
um and sometimes our story is what can help others. We all have a story. We
Yeah,
all
we
have
do.
a thing where the Lord showed up and worked. And I do think that becomes part of our testimony, right? And so there may be times where you get to share with a group or share in an environment where the Lord's calling you to share your story, to be vulnerable. And it's not to like shine, like our theme this year is glory for
Yep.
FCA, right? And it's about his glory. That the purpose of that sharing isn't so that people can see you and what like you've accomplished. It's so that the people can see the glory of the Lord, like what he did in your life, and actually believe that he can come do the same thing in them, and in their story. So yeah,
Amen.
I love this subject. Thank you.
Oh man, this is so good. And I I guess, like, before we get out of here, is there any last parting thoughts or things you'd like to share just in general, maybe about the same topic or in
Yeah.
addition or anything like that?
No, I'll just say this: like, growing up, I think I um I really believe there weren't people that I could go talk to about things going on
Mm.
in my life. And now when I look back, like there probably were, but maybe they didn't know how to open that doorway. But
Right.
that's different. Like I love this generation. Like they want life real. They
Hmm.
they don't want fake. Um and so what I would say is, like, don't get stuck. Like somebody else has walked what you're walking. Um, Keep reaching out, keep pressing forward, because you're gonna get connected with who you need. Like the Lord has that intersection with somebody to be able to move forward from the place you're at. Where you are right now isn't where you're going to be, and it might be,
Mm.
dealing with depression. It might be, some mental health things. It might be addiction. It might be just uh, a relationship that you just don't see breakthrough. Um, the Lord has that breakthrough, and He has those people for you. Don't give up. Keep pressing forward. So
Mm. Come on, man, that's good. Well, awesome. Well, Jesse, thank you so much for coming on and spending some time with us. We're so glad that you were able to do that, and thank you for sharing your heart and just for making some time.
love it. Thank
All
you.
right, no problem, guys. Thank you all so much.